Today, I'm following my mom to a small rice mill in our village. In my hometown, many families still keep paddy rice after each harvest season. When the family is running out of rice, they bring a sack of paddy to a place like this to have it milled into rice. This is a very familiar part of rural life in Vietnam. This rice mill is not big. Inside, the machines are quite loud, and there is a very distinct smell of paddy, rice bran, and rice dust. If you grew up in the countryside, this smell probably feels very familiar and close to home. There are two main machines here. One machine is used to separate the rice grain from its outer husk. In other words, it separates the white rice, the husk, and the bran. This is the most important machine because it turns dried paddy into the rice we can bring home and cook. The other machine is used to grind the rice bran. After the bran is separated from the rice grain, it is ground more finely and used as animal feed, usually for pigs, chickens, ducks, or other animals raised at home. When my mom and I arrived, there was already another customer being served, so we waited for our turn. They were also a mother and child. The mother was quite old, while her child did the heavier work, like carrying sacks, pouring paddy into the machine, collecting the rice, and tying the sacks. But I noticed that even though the mother was old, she didn't just stand still. She still helped her child hold the sacks, pick things up, check the rice, and move the lighter parts. This is a very familiar image in the countryside. Older people don't always rest in the way we might imagine. They still do whatever they can. They still support their children and grandchildren. They are used to keeping their hands busy. Maybe for them, doing something together with their children is also a way to feel that they are still useful in the family. In the countryside, many things don't need to be said out loud. Mothers and children, husbands and wives, neighbors, people just naturally help each other. One person holds the sack, another pours the paddy, another ties the string. Everything happens very naturally. After the previous customer finished, it was finally our turn. My mom brought the sack of paddy and placed it near the machine. After being dried under the sun, paddy still has its outer husk. If you look at it closely, each grain is yellowish-brown, long and hard. Inside that husk is the white rice grain we usually eat. To get the rice grain, the paddy has to go through the rice milling machine. The way a rice milling machine works is actually quite easy to understand. When the paddy is poured into the top of the machine, it is taken into a milling chamber inside. In that chamber, the grains rub against each other and against the parts inside the machine. This friction removes the outer husk from the rice grain. After the husk is removed, the machine separates the different parts. The heavier rice grains come out through one outlet. The lighter husks are pushed out through another. The bran, the very thin layer around the rice grain, is also separated during this process. Depending on how the machine is adjusted, the rice can be milled more or less. If it is milled more, the rice becomes whiter and looks cleaner, but more of the bran layer is removed. If it is milled less, the rice may not look completely white, but it keeps more of its outer layer and nutrients. In Vietnam, many families are used to eating white rice, so patty is often milled quite thoroughly. But older generations are also familiar with less polished rice, rice that looks slightly off-white, or even brown rice in some cases. Standing next to the machine, I could clearly see each part being separated. On one side, white rice was flowing down into the sack. On another side, the bran came out, finer and slightly yellowish brown. It looks simple, but this is actually a very important step. Before machines like this existed, separating rice from its husk was not easy at all. In the past, many families had to pound rice by hand using a mortar and pestle. They would put the patty into a mortar and pound it again and again to loosen the outer husk. After that, they still had to winnow it, sift it, and use a flat bamboo tray to separate the husk from the rice. That work required a lot of physical strength, and it was often done by women in the family. Now, thanks to rice milling machines, this work is much faster. A sack of patty only needs to go through the machine for a while, and then the family has rice to bring home. After the patty is milled, the bran is kept and taken to another machine. This is the bran grinding machine. Rice bran is separated from the outer layer of the rice grain. It is not something to throw away. In the countryside, bran is very useful, especially for families that raise animals. The bran grinding machine makes the bran, and any small pieces left from the milling process much finer. Once the bran is ground, people can mix it with vegetables, water plants, corn, sweet potatoes, or other food to feed pigs, chickens, and ducks. In many rural families, almost everything is used carefully. The rice grains are used to cook meals for people. The bran is used to feed animals. And after rice straw is dried, it can be used for cooking fires or burned into ash to fertilize the fields. Almost no part of the rice plant is meaningless. Our rice has been brought home. My dad is helping my mom unload each sack of rice. These sacks are quite heavy, so it usually takes another person to help. Since I left the city and came back to the countryside, I've been able to spend more time with my parents. And I get to see more of these very ordinary moments between them. Sometimes my parents still argue a little. It can be because of something small in the house, a sentence, or something that doesn't really matter. But usually, after a short while, everything goes back to normal. I realize that my dad is always there. He may not always say sweet things, but he always gives in to my mom. He helps her when she needs it, and quietly supports her in small things like this. Watching my parents carry the sacks of rice together makes me feel very happy. Maybe when we grow older, happiness is no longer something big or dramatic. Sometimes it is simply being close to your parents, seeing that they are still healthy, still doing familiar things together, still complaining to each other a little, and then continuing to care for each other as if nothing happened. After putting the rice away, now I want to show you one of my childhood snacks. It's called puffed rice. This snack is made from very simple ingredients like rice, mung beans, corn, peanuts, and a little sugar. There is nothing fancy about it. It doesn't come in beautiful packaging, and it is not an expensive treat. But for many children who grew up in the Vietnamese countryside, this was a very familiar snack. When I was little, we almost always had this at home. Sometimes my mom kept it in a big plastic bag, tied with a rubber band. Whenever I was hungry or wanted a snack, I would open the bag and take a little. Puffed rice is light, crispy, fragrant, and only slightly sweet. You eat one piece and then you want another. I think almost every child from the countryside in my generation knew this snack. In the past, children in rural areas didn't have as many snacks as they do now. There weren't many candies from supermarkets or colorful packaged snacks. Simple foods like puffed rice, boiled sweet potatoes, grilled corn, peanut candy, rice crackers, and traditional cakes were very ordinary, but they carried so many memories. Today, I'm coming back to a small puffed rice shop that I used to visit about 20 years ago. What surprised me is that almost everything still feels the same. The space still feels familiar. There is still the sound of the machines running, the sound of rice being poured in, the smell of hot roasted rice, sugar, peanuts, and freshly made puffed rice. Only a few new machines have been added, making the work faster and less tiring than before. And the owner of the shop almost doesn't seem to have aged at all. She is still youthful, beautiful, and cheerful, just like I remember. There are people you haven't seen for many years, but when you meet them again, they still feel so familiar. It feels as if a lot of time has passed, but some part of your childhood is still standing right there. Today, my mom brought rice, mung beans, and corn to make puffed rice. This is the same rice that was just milled earlier. Looking at it this way, I realize that from one sack of paddy, rice is not only used to cook daily meals, it can also become many other foods in everyday life. To make puffed rice, people first prepare the rice and other ingredients. They can add mung beans, corn, peanuts, or sesame seeds, depending on what each family likes. Then the ingredients are put into a machine to be heated and puffed. When I was little, every time someone in the village made puffed rice, children loved standing around to watch. We were curious, excited, and waiting for the moment when the puffed rice came out, so we could taste a little while it was still warm. Now, there are so many modern snacks. Children can have packaged chips, cookies, chocolate, milk tea, and many things that look more colorful and attractive. But for me, puffed rice still has a very special place. Not because it is the most delicious snack, but because it is connected to a part of my life. The days when I was small, living in the countryside, following my mom, watching adults work, and feeling happy just because I could eat a handful of warm puffed rice. As we grow older, many things change very quickly. People change. Villages change. Small shops like this are not as common as before. Children today may no longer feel as excited about puffed rice as my generation once did. And maybe that is exactly why I want to record these moments even more. After the puffed rice has been cut into pieces, my mom wraps it up to bring home. Looking at the bag of puffed rice in my mom's hands, I feel like we are not only bringing home a snack, but also a small piece of an old memory. If you grew up in the countryside, maybe you also have a very simple food that you never forget. For me, it is puffed rice. Think.